live. We're going to get started. Jeff. If anyone can hear me, raise their hand. If anyone can hear me, raise their hand. There's a lot of chatter. Hello. Hello, welcome. Thank you. I'll try to yell and also use a microphone at the same time. Welcome, everybody. As you can tell, we set up for about 50 people, and we're well beyond that. So I have a few items related to that. First of all, this is streaming right now on Facebook Live and YouTube. It also is going to be recorded, so you can watch it later if you don't want to watch it live from the comfort of your couch. All of the presentations we have are going to be loaded on our website as well. So if you cannot stay, cannot stand, cannot sit for an hour of information, feel free to, if you need to go, you can certainly go, and I can take a minute if you need to do that. Also, because there's so much interest, we're going to definitely have another one of these. It's looking like if we have another workshop similar, it will be very busy. So if you're feeling like you just are uncomfortable, you can't be here, I don't feel bad if you need to go. I don't want to make you feel bad about that. It's a little tight. We're going to have, the schedule today is about an hour of information, a lot of presentations, throwing you kind of rapid fire so you can kind of get the gist of a lot of topics in a short amount of time. And then from 11 to noon, it's really about asking questions with city staff, connecting with our local builders and lenders, and so you can really kind of see what works for your own property, because a lot of these are going to be really property-specific questions. So I just want to let you know that there's an opportunity from that at 11 to noon. I have some housekeeping items. I'm Jessica Brandt with the City of Lacey, and we have a couple housekeeping items, especially with exits. There's an emergency exit right there. There's a door there, and there's a door back there. So, and based on what I'm seeing, we are not exceeding fire code. Jeff can confirm that. I feel like I heard a number one time about how many people can fit in here per our fire code, and it was a lot higher than I actually thought it was going to be. We are not even close, so we're good to go. If you have a restroom need, it's just right out the door, right where you came in. 2 restrooms right there. And how this is going to go today is from 10 to 11, we're going to have information, and then 11 to noon, we have vendors that are set up out in the hallway and eventually maybe at those tall black tables over there. Once we kind of clear out. So if you don't have a need to talk to a lender or builder or city staff who are all right here at the dais, feel free to just go about your day at 11 o'clock. So we're gonna be done with presentations at about 11. We're running a few minutes behind, but I think we're still gonna make it. And I have just a real quick question. How many of you heard about this workshop from Thurston Talk? Okay, how many on Facebook? And I see hands that are not raised. How did you hear about it if you didn't raise your hand? Oh, you got the postcard. It worked. Great. Oh, and the yes, we've definitely been putting in our monthly utility bills. Good. Good to know what works. Okay. With that, let's get moving. This is streaming right now, but it's only focused on the screen and up here. So if you want to be famous, I'm sorry, you can come up here. So before we get started, and now I don't know if they're even in the room, they might all be in the hallway. If you're looking for someone to talk to following this workshop, city staff either have city name tags on or like name badges, lanyards, and most of them are sitting up here right now. If you're looking for a lender, they will have a button. If you're looking for a contractor or builder, they will also have a button. So if you're looking for someone to talk to, look for one of those 3 things. If you want to talk to city staff afterward, just line up right here. And if you want to talk to those other folks, they're mostly out in the hallway. Because it's really about connecting you with the people you need to get your project going. So what's an ADU? I'm assuming since you're here, you know what an ADU is, but just in case. It is a second small dwelling on your property, attached generally or not attached to a single family home. And it has its own distinct address and driveway. That's what makes it different than just an extra room in your house. It's got its own entryway and its own address. You've also probably heard them being called backyard cottages, mother-in-law apartments. I've heard all sorts of wonderful names for them, cute little cottages, backyard studios. But oftentimes the question comes up with ADUs is, what about tiny homes? Well, that's kind of a vague word, at least at the City of Lacey and most cities. We don't really have an adopted definition for a tiny home. If you have something that's on wheels or a trailer, we consider that an RV. So it's not a permanent dwelling. If you want to have a small home, like a tiny home on a permanent foundation, that is a tiny home, or a lot of times it's an ADU, because if it's in your backyard. If it's the only structure on the property, it's just a small home at that point. We don't really care what size it is, it's just a small home. So that's the difference. If you have a tiny home on wheels, it's an RV, you cannot live in it full time, you cannot just park one in your driveway and have your friend live in it. If you want to have a person living on your property that is in its own unit, it's got to be something on a foundation. So that's the distinction right there. So let's talk about housing affordability. The city has a housing affordability strategy we adopted this past summer, and it listed a number of actions we could take. I mean, the city, we don't build houses, but the things that we could do was streamlining. In a lot of areas, we thought ADUs were one thing we could definitely streamline. And so it's listed as one of the actions in our affordable housing strategy. Will this solve affordable housing by itself? No way, no way. It's definitely one piece of a really large puzzle and a lot of actions that all have to happen. So we're just promoting it through streamlining permitting. So let's talk about a little bit about our program and what it entails. We thought if we provided some free plans that meet our building codes, energy codes, and design codes, we could at least save some residents some money. You can take those design costs and put them into construction costs. And I think too, because they're already meeting our codes, they just get reviewed faster. We're really only going to be looking at site plans and making sure they meet setback requirements and all these other issues that go with siting a new small home. And so it saves you money, you get through the process faster. And I think something unique about City of Lacey that we're doing, we really thought if for this is going to work, we need to make sure we have a network of lenders and builders that are also ready and on standby, ready to work with homeowners so they can get these ADUs in their yard. And so we've connected with over 20 local lenders, more than once, at least twice over the last 5 months, and then worked with Olympia Master Builders and also just members of the building committee who aren't even members, but just kind of the local contractors. And we've been working with them and talking with them. So if someone shows up and is looking for a quote or wants to get a project done, they're aware of this program, they know it exists, and they're excited and ready to go. Also, at City of Lacey, we provide really great customer service just in general. You can come in, talk to the staff at the counter, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. It's always great to call and make an appointment with a building or planning staff, but if you don't want to, you can certainly come in and just come chat with us. We answer the phone, we answer our emails. We want to help you through the process. So as we were thinking about designs, if we were going to give away designs for free, we were trying to figure out what would be some attributes of what those plans should have. We really wanted them to be as affordable as possible to build, understanding we do not control labor and construction costs, but we do control other things like fees, and also just making sure that these plans were flexible for ADA options. You can roll in a wheelchair, you can roll in a stroller, there's enough room, they're very flexible so you can age in place. Also, we wanted to make sure they were meeting our city design guidelines and building codes, so that was just one less thing you didn't have to worry about. Also, a really key point, which you're going to find out more later, the flexibility of these things is pretty incredible. If you've seen our design guide, we have 2 floor plans, but what you can do with them is pretty limitless. So who's eligible? I get this question quite a bit. If you are in the City of Lacey proper, you're eligible to receive plans. If you are in our urban growth area or in our neighboring cities, it's hopefully coming soon. Olympia and Tumwater, we are working with city staff right now to try to figure out how to get these plans to work within their communities as well, and even get more plans. Because right now we have 2, but maybe we'll get up to 4 or more. We're trying to work that out right now. So maybe even by later this summer, which means hopefully we'll have another workshop and we can share even more information. Yes, in a much bigger space. And so in the future though, we're trying to figure out how do we work with the county as well, and how can we make sure if you're living in our urban growth area or in the county, you can also have access to ADU plans and make these work for your property. So we're working on it. We're definitely working on it. But if you're in Lacey right now, plans are available. HOAs, that's another common question I get. That is something the city does not enforce. Check with your HOA. Some of them prohibit ADUs outright. Some of them do not. Some don't speak to it at all. So really check there first and just see if there's any prohibitions with your HOA and any requirements they have. And the urban growth area, they do allow ADUs, they just have some slightly different requirements, so definitely go through Thurston County permitting for that, not the City of Lacey. With that, I'm gonna bring Tessa Smith up here, CEO of Artisans Group, and she's gonna talk about the benefits of ADUs, our planned features, and then just some topics on building costs. So with that, Tessa, please.
Awesome. So first of all, I attend lots of city council meetings, and it's really exciting to see people excited about this. This is an incredible thing for cities, and so I was wondering if it'd be okay if I took a photo of the room, just to capture, how incredible it is that you've come out to do this community event. So if you don't want to be in the photo, just put your face down and it'll be over quick. All right, but first of all, can we all just smile? Yeah, let's do some symbols. Let's make this fun. Thank you, guys. This is really neat to be a part of.
Clicker, yes.
Okay. Well, as Jessica said, I'm Tessa Smith, and I'm the CEO and one of the principal architects of the Artisans Group. We're a local architecture and planning business, and we are majority women-owned and women-led, which is pretty unique in architecture. We have about 10 employees, and we do a lot of projects in the Olympia, Tumwater, and Lacey area. So if you know Olympia Coffee, we do all their coffee shops. The 222 Market was one of our projects. The Dillinger's Rum Room, we do a lot of hospitality work, things like that. And then we do a ton of housing. And particularly, excuse me, our specialty has been net zero energy homes, or homes that use very, very little energy and are very healthy and sustainable to live in and to operate. So, benefits of ADUs. I think it's really easy to be scared of zoning changes. At least that's the predominant attitude I've seen in other cities. And one of the things that people don't realize is that zoning changes, these kinds of zoning changes, tend to promote the kind of things that we enjoy in a community. So who here has a coffee shop that you can walk to? Does anybody? I have a coffee shop I can walk to. Who here would like a coffee shop you can walk to? It's a wonderful community out. Who here would like to walk to a small grocery store? Who here would like a little restaurant where you could leave work and maybe get a beer or something, right? So all those things come from density. So when you are able to get more people sustainably living near each other, they can support the growth of small businesses. I'm hitting buttons while I'm talking. And that's how we end up having those community assets that are so enjoyable and make areas really lovely to live in. And when you have those kinds of amenities, the neighborhoods generally become more valuable, right? Your home is worth more because you've got all these amenities around it. So it tends to be a good step for any neighborhood. Additionally, we're providing housing for the middle class, which is really part and parcel to me because I'm a single woman living on a single income, and I have a roommate. And that's how I afford to live in a house. And not everybody wants or is in a position where their house can support that. And having those options for the middle class is becoming a really huge problem in the United States, not just our region. Don't know why that keeps advancing. The other thing that ADUs can do is they can create passive income for the people that live in them. So you are able to build this thing, you're able to pay off this thing with the rental income that you have, and then it's just providing income for you, providing income that you can put towards other things, which we'll have a slide about later. And then a really big one is flexible family living. So I don't know about you, but I'm looking at my parents trying to afford the cost of their parents in care facilities and things of that nature. It's extremely expensive, and there's not a lot of options in terms of retirement living these days, or maybe not a lot of options that we like or can afford. And these ADUs allow people to be able to stay together as families, and it's good, your parents can move into the ADU, you can rent out the house to the kids. There's all kinds of flexible living arrangements that you can do with an ADU. So what we designed, why the design matters, and how you get one. So as Jessica said, you're gonna go to the permitting counter, and they're gonna pull up your property and look and see if you are eligible for an ADU to be put on your property. And if you are, if it looks like it's gonna work, they're actually gonna hand you a full free plan set that's ready to be permitted, ready to be built. And it's really kind of an incredible thing if you think about it, because in our region, architecture fees generally are around 10% the cost of a project. 8 to 15 depending, but a good number is 10%. So that means that if the ADU costs $100,000 to build or $150,000 to build, that your average architect would be charging 15 grand for that plan set, if not more, depending on how tricked out or special it is. And they're saving you all of that cost so that you can put it into the construction of your ADU. The first design is 480 square feet. And as you can see, it's been designed with mobility challenges in mind. So it's got a wheelchair turning radius in the bathrooms. It's got some planning and approach for thresholdless showers. It's got open, flexible floor plans. This one can be a 1-bedroom or a studio, depending. And then, of course, we have the 600 square foot, which is a 1-bedroom version, again with the same accessibility for the bathrooms and a slightly larger kitchen and slightly larger grate space. The designs are designed to be mirrored or flipped to suit almost any lot. So that allows you to probably face them towards either a shared courtyard or a backyard. And then the designs can be tweaked to suit your fancy. So this is just a sampling we did of all the ways they could look. You could match your existing architecture. You can, I believe the language is complement your existing architecture. You could have it be slightly different, but still look good. You could have it just totally match your home. It's really up to you. And if those two don't suit you, and we do hopefully have more coming with our collaboration with Tumwater and Olympia, there are ones that are going to be for sale on our website. So we'll have ADUs for sale for $1,000 a piece for those construction documents. Again, saving you all that usual cost associated with architectural fees that you can put towards your construction. And so we've got other versions that are, different and varied, 2-story, one's over a garage, things like that. If the two that are provided by Lacey are not going to suit your needs or don't suit your vision for your project. The other thing that's integrated into the plan sets is energy upgrade options. So the plan sets have sort of check boxes. So, you want your roof to look like this, you want to use these window openings. And then, of course, there's going to be the Washington State Energy Code, which dictates that you do some energy upgrades to build the home in the state of Washington. So we've outlined those and made some suggestions where you can click check boxes. And with a few energy upgrades, you can actually see these little structures become very, very, very efficient. So this is an example of a home we did. It's a small home, so it's a good metric for an ADU. But the gray line is the neighborhood, the green line is their efficient neighbors, and the blue line is their home's energy use. It would be very easy to do that with the ADUs. So I was a general contractor for 10 years. I no longer am a general contractor. And you're gonna see a variety of costs associated with these ADUs depending on your fit and finish, the site work involved in the project, the contractor you hire, are you doing it yourself? All of those things. But the biggest question I get is scale, right? So people are like, the house is a quarter of the cost, or it's a quarter of the size of a normal house, let's say. Why isn't it a quarter of the cost? And it's, of course, an issue of scale. So bathrooms and kitchens are expensive, and spaces like great rooms and bedrooms are cheap, right? Because they're just mostly air and just sheetrock and a little bit of framing. And when you have those inexpensive spaces, you can spread out the cost of those expensive spaces like kitchens and bathrooms. You still have both those things in the ADU, but you don't have all that inexpensive square footage to spread it out over. So they are more per square foot than your average home to build, but overall, they're gonna be a lot less expensive in total cost. Does that make sense? I feel like I just explained algebra. This is a really great website. Architect Arena Grandma is in the backyard. I have followed this person. They write a lot of wonderful articles. And they reported from the Urban Land Institute that ADUs cost in Portland and Seattle in 2018, so mind you, the data is 2 years old and prices have risen, that things are around $160,000 to build an ADU. So we expect these ADUs to be anywhere, 150 to 200,000, 150 to 250, depending on what you finish it, how you finish it. And then I love this slide, also provided by Architect Arena, Grandma's in the Backyard. So the best line for us is going to be the, let's see, which one is it? There it is, the green line. So this is assuming, a cost for the house. It's assuming that you put less money down on the house and that instead, for $150,000, you built an ADU. And you can see how you pay off the extra cost of the ADU around year 4 to 6. And then you can see that if you take that extra money from the rental and you actually put it towards your mortgage, you're paying off your mortgage in 20 years instead of 30. That's a huge difference in the lifespan of that mortgage. And that's, just one example of some of the flexibility and financial freedom that these ADUs could provide for people. So I think with that, it's back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Tessa. I think I have a slide here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about permitting, process, and site feasibility. This is where you get to pause for a minute. If you have a property you're thinking about, just visualize what it looks like, how close it is to the front of the yard, how much backyard space you have, how much side yard space you have. So we're going to try to figure out what's going to work for you. Because we have some requirements just in general, whether you use our plans or have your own custom plans. We have just some basic ADU requirements here in Lacey. I want to make sure you're aware of those up front. So if you want to build something, it can be 800 square feet in floor area or 1/2 the size of your main house, whichever is less. So think about that. How big is my house? What's half of that? Is it 850 or is it a different number? Choose the lower number. Or 850 if you really want it. We can talk about it. This is a question I've been getting recently. Some people own duplexes and they're wondering if they can put one in their backyard of the duplex they have. Currently, right now, you cannot. This is for single family homes right now. And so that's where we're really focused, is just one house on the lot currently. And if you have room in the back, then we can certainly talk about that. It has to be clearly subordinate to the main use. Do you ever wonder how we came up with accessory dwelling unit? It's accessory to the main use. So that's why it's called an accessory dwelling unit. And obviously it's a smaller piece of, a smaller building than your main house. You need to have an off-street parking spot. So think about that. If you have garage space currently, driveway space, you can count parking spots in your garage and in your driveway. So you might already be there without having to add any extra space for off-street parking. Pedestrian access, that just means that whoever is living in that unit has to have a pathway to get there, and with a certain size, and we can talk about, based on your property, what that might look like. And then privacy concerns, which I'm so glad Tessa brought up the flexibility of these designs, because if you're trying to figure out which way to turn it and place it so that all of your windows aren't either facing your house or your neighbor's house, or maybe you need to think of some fencing, things like that. It's just about being really mindful about how whoever is living there and who else is around it, everyone gets to have their privacy based on how the ADU is situated. Something unique about Lacey, I think other communities don't have, is we don't have owner occupancy requirements. So if you have a main house you're renting out and you want to put an ADU in the back, you can certainly have both of those as rental properties on the same piece of property. That's just fine. So we're talking about two pathways to permitting. One is using our pre-approved plans, and one is using just your own custom design. And you can certainly do either of those. We've allowed ADUs in Lacey for a while. For, I'll just say 10 to 15 years, it has been okay to build ADUs in Lacey. And so we've always had a pathway for people wanting to do that. And we permit about, 2 or 3 a year. And so we're trying to figure out how to encourage more of that through these designs that we have available. So let's talk about site feasibility considerations. Like, this is where you're visualizing your property right now. Think about the layout. So let's pretend this is your parcel. Think about how wide is my lot? How deep is my lot? How big is my house? If I want to put something in the backyard, will it fit? Will it work there if I want something detached? So for building setbacks, from the rear property line, you need 15 feet. From the side property line, you need 5 feet. So just think about what that might look like in your yard right now. Also, like I said, privacy considerations. Who's around you? What are the houses around you looking like? Do you have fences already? Do you have places that you might want to place windows versus not place windows on the ADU? Are you on sewer? It is a lot easier to build one of these if you're already on sewer. If you have a septic system, those are really usually built to what the current house is, and so you gotta go through the Thurston County Health Department and really talk with them about capacity issues and drain fields and all those good things. So it's a lot easier if you're already on sewer, because you can just tap into that existing line. Building and development coverage, that's another issue. So think of your property, your square footage of your property, the square footage of the house that's already on it, the square footage of concrete and hard surfaces, and think about what the percentages of those are, because depending on which zone you're in, there's different requirements for building and development coverage. You can't have no trees, all concrete, all buildings. There's definitely a ratio there. So you can talk with city staff to figure out what makes sense for your property and if you have the room for that. Stormwater goes right along with that. Depending on how much space you have for your property, you can work with our city staff to figure out how to manage the stormwater that's running off the roof of that new structure, because it's more pervious surfaces and impervious surfaces. That ratio is going to change if you put another structure on your property. So we'll work with you to try to figure out what your requirements have to be for that. And again, existing structures. Are you going to place it in the far back, in the corner, how close to your house, meeting building codes? I think you need at least 10 feet between the two structures. So figuring out if that'll even fit for you. And then just thinking about your short and long-term use. I mean, maybe in the short term, you want to have a family member live back there, but in the long term, maybe you want to use it as a rental. So just trying to figure out the design considerations for that, whether it's accessibility or where the entrance and doorway might be, how close you want it to your house, things like that. Ideally, I mean, this is not a requirement, it's just thinking about the universe of sites out there in Lacey and your properties. If you have about 10,000 square feet or a quarter acre and you're on sewer, it's a good place to start the conversation. If you're kind of in a newer development with a smaller lot, you just might not have room for a detached ADU, but you may have some room for some other things, which we'll talk about. Let's keep on this track of I want to use a pre-approved plan from Lacey, this 480 square foot or 600 square foot detached ADU. What do I need to do? Where do I start? First thing that's really helpful is just talking with city staff. We can walk you through your property, kind of look at an overhead view on Google Maps just to try to give you some basic measurements and just kind of see if it might work for you just right off the bat before you go down that path of trying to find a contractor or a lender. We can just do a quick, high-level site feasibility for you and just to try to see if it's going to work. And then if it looks like it might work, we can definitely give you a copy of the plans so you can go forth and find your own contractor and financing. And the permit application process is pretty painless. It's one piece of paper called an ADU permit application, two copies of a site plan, and then that plan set we give you, there's literally check boxes for you to write on for us and give it back to us so we know what you're selecting, and then we'll make a copy for you so you have two copies in your file. So what if these detached plans don't work for you? What if you just don't have that backyard space? We have conversations with people all the time about garage or shop conversions. Some people already have existing structures and they want to utilize those. If you don't have a lot of stuff in your garage and you want to turn it into an apartment, that might work for you. A lot of people like garages to store their stuff in cars, but not everybody. Or you can rebuild your garage and add ADU on top if that works. Some people have converted their basements. There's just kind of a couple options, and that's really going to come down to talking with our building staff to figure out if it's going to work for you. So let's go through that process. Very similar. Start with a call or a visit to the City of Lacey. Talk to somebody about your situation. Bring pictures if you have pictures. That always helps. And then kind of talk through some options and then go work with a contractor and get a little bit next level of detail so you can kind of see maybe what your costs might be and what that might look like. On the financing side, same thing. Whatever you got to do if you can't pay cash, we're going to have a session real quick here on financing. And then it's going to be a little bit iterative. Like, I really encourage you and whoever you choose to be your contractor to work hand in hand with the City of Lacey building staff, because they'll make sure you're going to get through the process and meet the requirements, and you're not going to submit an incomplete application or come up with plans that just aren't going to meet the building requirements. So it's really going to be a working together throughout the process. And that's why we're here. Same thing. Permit application, 2 sets of plans, energy code worksheets, and site plans. So it's just a little bit more paperwork because it is, again, a custom design. If you use the pre-approved plan, we already know it's going to meet building codes and design codes, so you don't have to submit that. Let's talk about permit fees. It's pretty reduced for ADUs, considering we don't have connection fees for sewer or school mitigation fees, traffic mitigation fees. So if you want to get oh, hello. If you want to permit something that costs $100,000 to $150,000 to build, your permit fees will be about that. If you want to permit something that's a little bit less expensive to build, your permit fees will be about $1,300. So if you consider the cost of building a brand new single-family home on a vacant lot, permit fees are about $20,000. And so we've really reduced the fees for building ADUs in Lacey. And those costs are pretty low compared to our neighbors. So it's a pretty good deal if you want to start down that path. Let's talk about financing. I'm going to caveat all of this information with, I'm a planner, I am not a lender. I have a coworker who couldn't be here today who used to be in the banking world, and he made this presentation for me with all the notes. We've gone out and talked to over 20 local lenders more than once, and we just tried to gather information on what they're offering right now. We tried to consolidate at a very high level of the different options people are using to finance their ADUs. And after that's over, I'm actually going to encourage everybody to go find anybody with one of the buttons with a dollar sign on it to go talk with them to get the details. And if they're not in here, they're going to be out in the lobby. Is there any lenders in here right now with buttons on? Okay. Find somebody with a button. Don't ask me any lending questions. I won't be able to help you, unfortunately. Oh, but there's some buttons out there. You can get you one if you didn't get one yet. So let's talk about that. So there's going to be you're going to probably be in one of these two scenarios right now. You're either a homeowner who lives in their home or you're an investor owner, so you have a rental property. So we have kind of two pathways. Generally, if you're living in your home and you want to build something, you have a lot more options. And a lot of the lenders we did talk to have just a lot more choices for people and a lot more flexibility than if you have investor-owned properties, just based on who we talked with. But those who do have investor-owned properties, there are options, and there's a couple lenders around here that are doing really unique and creative things that will actually work. So let's start with owner-occupied. So essentially, I'm going to talk about three types of second mortgages. They're common, they're plentiful, most lenders offer these. We have the home equity line of credit and the home equity loan. They've been around for decades. Virtually all lenders have one or more of these. So the difference being the home equity line of credit, what did George say? It's like a credit card with a really high limit. And it's based on the equity in your home. And they generally have high limits with low interest rates because you're putting up your home as collateral. And the type of loan is different from your primary mortgage in that you don't get a lump sum payment. But the home equity loan, the other one, it's like a really big car loan. So you borrow a fixed amount secured by the equity in your home, you receive the money in one lump sum, and then you have a fixed interest rate, fixed term, and a fixed monthly payment. So those are the two types of second mortgages that are pretty plentiful and common. A third type that we heard about out there, lack of a better word, home improvement loan. And it relies on the equity in your home, but you're asking the lender to lend against the value of improvements you're making, in this case, an ADU. And not many lenders offer these because there's a little more risk associated, like can they get comparables? And so property owners who want to add to the price of their home can do so with home improvement loans. And there are a few lenders out there who do these kind of loans. Let's talk about new first mortgage. If you're owner-occupied still, up until now we've talked about second mortgages. So these are shorter term, higher interest rate. These are longer term, lower interest rates. So that's kind of the difference. So more likely if you're wanting to do other improvements. Some examples are like, I need to fix that drafty window in the back bedroom, or I want a new roof as well, or I need to replace my heater. This is kind of a way people do that with a cash out refinance. And so you take your existing mortgage, new mortgage is larger than the amount of the existing, and you get the difference between the two loans in cash. And so a lot of homeowners do this so they can turn some of the equity they've built up their home into cash. So once again, talk with your existing lenders. If you haven't done this already, interest rates are really low. A lot of people are doing this right now, just in general, we've been hearing. So if you're investor owned, you have options. There's a few less things you can do, but they still have equity line, equity loans, cash out refinance. There's only about 3 banks locally I've talked to, and I'm not going to list those. I'm going to let you go talk to people because I can't refer anybody to anyone. All of our lenders are amazing, and our general advice is start with who you're already working with. Who is your bank you have right now? Start there And if they don't offer something that works for you, feel free to go shop around and get a couple quotes and see what people are offering, because everyone has a unique financial situation. So it's so hard to say, here's your option A, B, or C, and it'll work for everybody. So it's really about having that conversation. I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself. So in the end, we'll just say if you have owner-occupied, you live in it, you want to build something, you have a lot of options. If you own a piece of property you don't live on and you want to build something, you have options but fewer, but they are still available, and there's some really great lenders doing some things that are really creative. Landlord-tenant, is Nick Yuva here from Department of Commerce? Hello, I haven't seen you yet today.
Missing in action.
I guess he is. Is anyone, Nick Yuva, Department of Commerce, is he out there? Who wants to talk about landlord-tenant laws? I don't. How about I go to the next speaker, and if Nick comes, we can circle back to him. How about that? Trudy. Trudy, do you want to be our double speaker here?
I can be backup also.
Okay. Well, Trudy's on our speaker roster already. This is Trudy Sukup from Homes First. We can keep it here for now, and then we'll switch it over for her next session. So you're going to talk about
A little bit
about landlord-tenant laws and then property management.
Yes.
Okay, beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi. I see a lot of familiar faces in here, so I know lots of people who know who Homes First is already. So let me tell you, for those who don't know us, we're a local nonprofit. This is actually our 30th anniversary year. And we have been providing safe, healthy, and affordable housing for really low-income people. And we've been working with the City of Lacey to also do accessory dwelling units because we have 46 properties. Many of them are appropriate for putting in ADUs, which helps us have higher density without actually having to go out and buy another property, which is good for everybody. So landlord-tenant law, what I can tell you is if you're renting out your property, it applies. If you have a tenant, landlord-tenant law applies to you. And it is not as easy as it used to be. Landlord-tenant law is getting more complex every year. So lots of people do choose to use property managers when they're renting out. And there's lots of different property managers in the community who can help you with that. But if you choose to rent out even if you're renting out a home, a room in your home, you're going to have to apply, make sure you're being true to the landlord-tenant laws. And that's a protection both for landlords and for tenants. That's why it's called landlord-tenant law. What else would you like to know about landlord-tenant law, Jessica? I don't have, oh, does he have slides? Okay, let's see.
He was just going to talk.
Nope, okay. He was just going to talk. The great thing that Nick would have talked about is he is actually the manager for the mitigation fund for landlords. So if you choose to work with low-income tenants and they are subsidized in any way, so if they have a Section 8 voucher, or they have a veterans voucher, or they have a church who's helping them pay for their rent, whatever it is, and they damage your unit in any way, there's a mitigation fund, which will actually help pay for you to fix those units up to $5,000. So it'll also help you pay for lost rent if for some reason that you lose rent. Now, we've been working with really, really low-income tenants for 30 years, and I'll tell you, for the most part, they're awesome tenants. They're awesome tenants. They know that when they're getting a really great deal from someone who cares about helping them have a place to live, that they need to cherish that spot. So for the most part, we have very little problems, and most of our tenants pay on time, especially for the tenants who are subsidized because they're getting their rent money from through another process. So, of course, anyone who rents, you're always taking a risk, and in fact, you have less of a risk if you rent to a tenant who has a subsidy of some sort, because there is this now mitigation fund for landlords in Washington State. Oh, I see a question back there, yeah.
Where do you get a copy of the Landlord-Tenant Act?
You can probably just Google it.
Trudy, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry, yeah. Where do you get a copy of the Landlord-Tenant Act? You Google Washington State Landlord-Tenant Law. Or, I'm sure there's lots of property managers here who will give you, I can't tell you because I actually have a property manager on my staff. So if I have a question, I go to him and say, okay, what's the law around this? I don't have to remember all of that.
Yes.
RCWs
Hi.
will be, hi Trudy, RCWs will be good, Revised Code of Washington and WAC.
Yes.
Washington Administrative Code, because it's changing every year.
Yep.
You know, I'm half a person of color, but, so I'm not seen, but I was the vice president of Washington State Landlord Association.
Mhm.
So 16,000
Right.
members and 400,000 properties under management in state of Washington.
Yeah, so there's the Washington Landlords Association.
So, yeah.
So they, if, you know, it's very inexpensive to be a part of the Washington Landlords Association. So if you are a landlord, join them, because they will give you a lot of guidance on what you need to be thinking of, and forms and formats and all kinds of stuff. So thank you. Anyone else before I move along? Yes?
Can you talk about funds available to landlords who might wish to rent to somebody who's currently homeless or has unstable housing and
Right.
want to give them assistance?
So as far as so she's asking about funds that are available to landlords to house either people who are currently homeless or on the edge of being homeless or having other challenges. As far as I know, there's no funds directly for landlords, but it's for the tenants. So there's a lot of different social service providers out there who provide assistance to tenants as they are moving in, if they're moving off the street or they're moving into a home. And that's something that the tenants have to seek out. It's not something that necessarily the landlord would seek out. But it helps them pay maybe their first month's rent and their fees and some of the other things that the costs, because that's one of the biggest barriers for people who are homeless to move into a home are all the costs to moving into a home. It's very expensive that first month or two.
So I connect with Family Support
Mhm.
Center, and then they send me a tenant.
Yeah.
And I interview them and
Yeah.
select them.
So in Thurston County, we have what's called coordinated entry. So tenants go to different organizations in the community, depending on if they're a family, if they're single, or if they're youth. So there's Family Support Center for families, there's Community Action Council for singles, and youth is Community Youth Services. And so those organizations help coordinate things for the tenants as they're moving in, make it a little less challenging. But landlords can also go directly to them and say, hey, I have a place, I would like to give a person who is struggling a home, and they'll help connect you with a tenant who already comes with financial supports. And usually case management too, if they need case management for whatever reason. Often, you know, tenants don't only need case management at the beginning of the process, because they're just struggling every day. They don't have the bandwidth to figure out all these systems. It's a very complex system for people who are homeless. And so the service providers help them get through the process, get them housed, and then once they're stable, they can say, great, come back to us if you have a problem, but you're on your own now, which works for most tenants. Any other questions? Or anybody else want to share information? I'm happy to repeat up here.
Inform us a little bit about the short-term rentals or maybe for the Airbnb type rental situations for these accessory dwelling units?
I do not know about short-term rentals or accessory dwelling unit Airbnb types of things. So that's not my area of expertise.
I can come back and address
Okay,
that.
Jessica will come back to that.
You want to go to your next one?
Yep.
Okay, just want to keep us on time.
Maybe it went away. One of the things that Homes First is doing is we are actually doing some conversions of our garages. So we do a lot of shared housing, because that's another way that we can reduce the cost. Because as an owner of properties that we rent out, we also have bills to pay. We are not a governmental agency, and we're not giving free housing. We have a mortgage on every one of our properties. In fact, Ole Fed has mortgaged every single one of our properties for the last 30 years. So we have principal and interest to pay, just like you do, right? So all of our tenants have to pay rent. And one of the ways that we are trying to find opportunities to increase the number of units we have is by doing accessory dwelling units on properties we already own. So we do shared housing. We have 13 homes for adults with developmental disabilities, which are all shared. And so some of those have garages. They're not being used. They're just being used to store junk, right? So what you're going to see, as soon as Rick gets it back up, is a video of one of the processes we went through to convert one of our garages. So you don't actually have to do an ADU. That's when it was originally a garage. And you're going to see the processes they go through. And this was the redesign. Junk. So this is another way to do accessory dwelling units, is to convert something that's already on your property.
Now, we worked with the Youth Build program, awesome program through Newmarket Skills Center and Community Youth Services. They work with us to do these conversions. Now, it takes them 2 years to do this conversion, but because we already own the property, we don't have any carrying costs on that. So if I was building something new and I had to get a mortgage and it didn't get rented up for 2 years, I'd have all those carrying costs, right? Would not be good. But because we're converting a garage, then it works fine. We can give Youth Build 2 years. And so they're learning skilled construction trades while they get their education, finish their high school degree. So it's great for them and it's great for us. So the other thing that we do is that we can manage people's properties for them if they are renting to low-income tenants. So again, we don't do it for free, but no property manager is going to manage your property for free. So, but we specifically try to work with folks who want to rent to low-income people. So one of our examples is we do Oxford House International as well, which is shared housing for clean and sober living. They are another program. We partner with the service provider, which is Oxford House International. And for many years, we had a lady who leased us her house, big old house. It has something like 7 or 8 bedrooms in it. And then we worked with Oxford House International to make sure that folks who were in recovery had a safe and healthy place to live so they could successfully recover. Now, eventually, after 10 years of managing that property for her, she donated it to us because she decided, well, I actually don't need this property. I don't need to sell it to anybody. I don't need to give it to my children. We're all fine, so she donated the property, and so it's going to be an affordable, clean and sober home forever because we don't sell houses. But you might want to think about, if you want to do affordable housing, not just an ADU for your mom or an ADU for, your children, that this is another option, is to house people who need a long-term or even a short-term place to get their lives back in order, and Homes First can help you with that as well.
Judy?
Yes.
So Homes First, if we
Yes, Matthew.
Homes First manage
Mhm.
for us,
Yeah.
can the owner expect market rates?
No. No, they're not going to get market rates. Yeah, that's a good question. So we're doing it because we are mission driven to house people, but we also have bills to pay. So you're not going to get a market rate rent back from that. You're going to be doing that because you want to help the community. But you'll get something from it if you want to. So the woman who was leasing to us was leasing like $1 a year for 10 years, right? Because she didn't need to have income from that house. So if you're looking to do it for income purposes, you're not going to get it as big an income from it. Yeah, we do, and we figure it out per property and figure out, what's it actually going to cost us to maintain this house, and then what's the income going to look like. So then we base it on what our costs are. It's not a fixed rate. We look at each one individually. That's what we do with all our properties. We look at each property individually. We don't have an apartment complex, right? We're not looking at apartments. We're looking at scattered site houses, and each house is a little bit different.
How much below market rate are you?
We are serving people who are 30% or below for the most part. We can go up to 60% AMI, area median income. So we're, between 40 and 70% below market rate rent. Any other questions? This was pretty inexpensive for us to do, mostly because we did it with Youth Build. The biggest costs were connecting to the sewer, connecting to the all the utilities and stuff. So it has its own independent power. So we have a person living in there, an adult with developmental disabilities, who actually has some physical disabilities as well. You saw we put the ramp in. That is a whole separate from the house. So the people who are living in the main home have a service provider, and then the person who's living in the ADU has a separate service provider. So we don't do the services, we partner with all these different organizations. So the service providers don't have to be property managers, and we don't have to be service providers. Okay,
Good deal.
thank you.
Thanks,
Any other
Trudy.
questions?
I've
No?
got Ryan with a microphone, so I'm going to...
Awesome.
Thank you, Trudy, so much. So we have a few minutes before we break and go connect with who you need to connect with. I heard a question about Airbnbs, short-term rentals. We don't have requirements in Lacey around that right now, so if you want to rent it out short-term, that's fine. You can certainly do that. Ryan has a microphone, so if you have a question for the good of the group versus something very property specific, now is a great time to answer that question for you. So if you have one, Ryan has a microphone, because this is being recorded. We want to make sure we capture all the questions and answers. Do you have a question? Any of the topics we've covered in the last hour? I see one in the back, of course. Is there a limit on the number of bedrooms you can have in an ADU? We're really focused on square footage, so 850 or less. So it comes down to design with your architect. And I was like, Tessa can probably speak to that better than me.
I'll just add that in the negotiations that are happening with Tumwater and Olympia, we're trying to do more designs so that there's more options for people. And the designs that we're pushing for are going to be hopefully be 2-bedroom designs. And honestly, that 850 square foot limit is pretty difficult to get a 3-bedroom into. It's actually pretty difficult to get a 2-bedroom and have them be big enough that you can maneuver, say, a wheelchair or things like that around the bed and stuff. So they do become kind of limiting to a certain degree. But we are hoping for a 2-bedroom one in the future.
Okay.
Any discussion yet with the assessor's office on how this is going to affect the assessed value of properties and how it might increase their taxes?
The short answer is no, but that's a great question for them, and we're going to talk to them.
I will say that there was a ADU conference that I attended a few months ago, and they had pulled data from Portland and Seattle primarily, and they were seeing an increase of the property values. And I'm not sure it was assessed value. I think it was more like market rate, but they were seeing an increase in the property values anywhere from like 15 to 70%, because sometimes the ADU was actually in those cities like nicer than the main house, you know, and so like I know I saw this, I was like 70%, really, but it can happen. So yeah.
Excuse me.
Who's talking? Oh, thank you.
Can they be on their own electrical service, or they have to be tied into the main house's electrical, et cetera?
Jeff. This is why we have everybody here, because Jeff is in our building department. He has details. I won't have details.
If your main electrical panel can handle the additional load, you could use that. It could be quite expensive if you had to provide an additional electric service. But the main house, we're assuming that it has gas appliances, so we're hoping that it has some additional electrical capacity.
No question.
Oh.
Yeah, nobody heard you. Keep the mic.
If your main house has enough capacity to supply the ADU, then you could use your existing panel in the house. And that existing house, we're hoping that it has gas appliances, so it would be a gas water heater, a gas furnace, so it should have some additional electrical capacity.
Okay, thank you.
So let's say your ground floor, you want it to be a garage. Does you have an 800 square foot limit? Does that 800 square foot correspond with the garage as well? Or is that 800 square foot that is separate, even though you want it to be on top of a garage?
It's about living space. So bottom top, separate. 450 and 450, so you could have 900. Kind of like the slide Tessa had with a 900 square foot garage, that the top part would be 450, and that's fine.
A couple more in the back here. There was somebody over here.
If it's above 600 square feet, this is for if we already have an existing building, does it not qualify for the ADU? Or what are the rules around that?
So you have an existing structure, and it's over 600, but is it under 850?
No, it's probably about 1,000 square feet, but it's already there. It was an old shop.
Okay, and then relative to the size of your main house, how big is your main house?
Probably like 1,200.
Oh, interesting.
It's already been permitted, but it's been 30 years or something, so.
Oh, Ryan's got the microphone. He can answer that for you since he's right there.
So you'd be limited to 600 square feet. You'd be able to convert 600 square feet of that shop into an accessory dwelling unit. The rest would probably be garage or something like that.
Why only 600, not 850?
So the size of the accessory dwelling unit is based on, again, it's coming back to the word accessory. It needs to be half, at least, no more than half the size of your main house, so that it's actually smaller than the main unit. There's other allowances if you do have the ADU within your actual primary dwelling. You can go up to 850, but if it's going to be a separate building, it's strict that it's half the size of the main unit, not to exceed 850. Yes.
Real quick, something I'll add to that is that that is not a code that exists in some other cities like Seattle and Portland, that half of your main house square footage. And it exists in code, but it actually is not really in keeping with the intent of adding ADUs and missing middle housing. So you could go to your city council in Lacey and you could say, we should consider a code amendment to remove that rule, because it's not one that we're seeing the state of Washington support or things like that. It's a little bit of a more archaic code. So you could actually, go through the process to address that if it becomes a continuing problem.
Looks like we got maybe 2 more questions.
Wrap it up.
So on the 15-foot setback, is that from the foundation wall, or is that from any additional pad that you might pour?
It's from the structure.
From the foundation wall.
Yes. The side wall.
We had a question over here. Somebody? Yeah, sir.
I have one concern here. I'm born and raised in Thurston County, 80 years, 40 years in the City of Lacey. We have a hell of a lot of subdivisions in this county, let alone in Lacey. Many of those, most of those, have homeowners associations. All of them have their own rules. I can see some clashes, because some people are going to be absolutely opposed to these units coming into the neighborhood. Some will be in favor of the concept that you guys are working with here, like myself. But they can interfere, and we could get into a real scramble, homeowners association versus the system, City of Lacey and so forth. There has to be a point there, somebody has the power over the other one. I believe it's the City of Lacey that we could discount the rules of the homeowners association. However, a number of those are going to end up in court. We'll start to foul all this thing up. I just was interested in your comment there, that's all.
Okay. Didn't sound like a question, just a comment? Okay.
I think we got time for one more. We're running out of time here. Check with your homeowners association. We're at the city, we're not going to be checking those rules and regulations. If you want to change those rules and regulations, you need to do that with your HOA. Last question.
Hi, just quick. So the plans will be available at the counter, or do you have some spare ones, or how would that work? Part A and then part B later.
So I'm really glad you asked this. So the plans are not available for people to just take. They're not meant to provide the world with ADUs, right? Technically, they actually belong to my company, and we have lent them. They're being rented by the City of Lacey. So if you try to permit them or use them outside the City of Lacey, you're actually stealing, and it says that on the plan set. So we want this to move forward, which is why we've so passionately participated in it. But you can purchase the plans from us for $1,000 if you're not eligible for them in the City of Lacey. And if you are, they're going to look at the property with you and determine that you're eligible before giving you a plan set. The idea is to get the ADUs built, not give free ADUs to every developer in the world.
Thank you, Jessica. I knew that. So, second part, we are all concerned about housing. Housing for middle class, housing for middle segment. So there's not a single silver bullet which can solve all those problems. So I want to have it in people's consciousness or in the back of the mind that housing land trusts are a good way. I'm serving my second term on the Thurston County housing land trust, not a conservation land trust. And that keeps the housing permanently affordable forever. So, and I'm the public trustee, and I represent the public interest. Thank you.
Yeah, and it's a good closing comment, perhaps, is that this is just one tiny baby step to try and provide missing middle housing, to the populace. There's also going to need to be a lot of measures. There's going to need to be zoning changes. There's going to need to be subsidies from the federal government. We have a housing crisis, and this is Lacey just taking a really innovative and really incredible step. They're the first city in the state of Washington, to my knowledge, to do anything like this and to provide their citizens with free ADU plans. So it's not a perfect solution. It is part of a perfect solution.
Okay, thank you. In closing, oh, yes, thank you, Tessa. As I mentioned when we got started, this has been recorded on Facebook Live and YouTube, so you can rewatch it later if you want to. The presentations themselves will be uploaded on our website. Hopefully I can get to that by Monday at the latest. So if you want to see any of these slides later, those will be available on our website. With that, I really encourage you to connect with our lenders and builders out there in the lobby. And if you have other questions for city staff, they're up here. If they want to look at your property, if you have questions specific to that, feel free. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good Saturday.